Job, last week, Job chapters 4 and 5, we saw dialogue from Eliphaz, one of Job's friends, or quote unquote friends. Eliphaz, the point of his message in chapter 5 was that, Job, if you're enduring all this suffering, if you're going through all this hardship, then surely you must have done something to deserve it. You've done something to make God want to punish you. And that was really the gist of what he said. Now, Eliphaz did make a few exceptional points in his dialogue. He said things such as, the individual who is corrected from sin should rejoice, and that is true. The individual who is course corrected away from their sin absolutely has reason to rejoice in being corrected. That's not the attitude many take today, unfortunately. But that was a good pearl of wisdom, and he spoke a lot about things that were objectively true when it comes to our relationship with God. However, they could not be applied to Job, and so Eliphaz is largely misled. On top of that, Job at this time requires comfort. He is suffering to an existential degree. He is wishing for his own death, as it were. He has nothing to be happy about. So he doesn't need necessarily a lecture right now, or he doesn't want a lecture. He doesn't deserve one. Once again, he is an innocent man. And so in chapter 6, we're going to see his response to Eliphaz. And so, let's see, getting right into our text, Job answered, he's answering Eliphaz, and he said, "Oh, that my grief were thoroughly weighed and my calamity laid in the balances together." This almost reads like sarcasm. You must have me all figured out then, Eliphaz. If only I had my suffering had been weighed properly. And so he right out the bat is defensive, and rightfully so. Verse 3, "For now it would be heavier than the sand of the sea. Therefore my words are swallowed up. For the arrows of the Almighty are within me. The poison whereof drinketh up my spirit. The terrors of God do set themselves in array against me." Now this is an interesting verse. A lot of people, again, like to point to this verse as an inconsistency in Scripture. We read that in Job 1:22 and really throughout the book of Job that Job never charged God foolishly, as 1:22 says. Job never blamed God for his suffering. But when we see statements from Job like this, "The arrows of the Almighty, the arrows of God are within me. The poison whereof drinketh up my spirit." Think of a poison-tipped arrow. It's a weapon that means death. So Job is painting this picture of being filled with arrows. They're all poisoned. His body is poisoned. He's bleeding. This is, of course, not literal. Painting a picture here of, if an individual were filled with arrows, the terrors of God do set themselves in array against me. The terrors of God set themselves in array against me. That sounds kind of like an accusation. So is the book of Job contradictory? No. What he's saying here is that his suffering is so profound that it feels as though God himself is inflicting it with his limitless power. Ultimately, he's saying his troubles are greater than what any mere mortal can inflict upon him. Now, of course, Job doesn't have the full picture yet of what's going on, but what he is saying is objectively true, insomuch as Satan is not a mortal source. Satan inflicting this suffering upon him is not any mortal. He is of, I guess, what we could call supernatural power. Not, of course, anything that compares to God. We think about punishment from God, what that looks like, especially throughout the Old Testament. Once again, we're in the patriarchal age. So this was before the time of Israel. This was before the time that we truly see the wrath of God in action. And so I would argue that Job's suffering would be far more profound, if you can imagine that, if it were God inflicting this punishment. So this is not an accusation. This is a speaking as though the suffering itself were inflicted upon God. Once again, Job's initial reaction when he lost everything was to fall down and worship God. So he does not impart blame upon God for his suffering. So he continues in verse 5. Does the wild ass bray when he has grass, or loweth the ox over his fodder? Can that which is unsavory be eaten without salt? Or is there any taste in the white of an egg? So what Job is saying here, first of all, am I not justified in lamenting and reacting to my pain? What other response to pain is there? Am I not justified in reacting to this pain? There's an element of shame almost present here as well. I feel like a donkey who only makes noise when his food runs out. That's kind of what's happened to Job. He's gone from this wealthy, privileged, but still righteous lifestyle, and now he's having all of these complaints. So he's comparing himself to a livestock an animal of livestock who's only makes noise when their food has run out. This is kind of what Satan accused Job of, speaking to God in previous chapters. You take away all these blessings, Job's not going to have any reason to worship you. He's not going to have any reason to praise you. But God takes him up on that. And so Job still expresses a humility in all of this suffering. I'm actually going to see him in this same chapter almost express an embarrassment for even complaining about his suffering. And so, where are we? Verse 7, the things that my soul refused to touch are as my sorrowful meat. His sorrow is almost sickening to him. He is obviously not one who is apt to complain, partly because previously he had very little reason to, which he acknowledges, but also because it's unbecoming. And so we can say he probably feels even more pathetic griping about his problems, even speaking about them, rather than just handling them, just taking it on the nose, as it were, having a certain stoicism, just being hardened to his suffering. We kind of see a shame from Job for even bothering to complain. Oh, then I might have my request, verse 8, and that God would grant me the thing that I long for. What's the thing he longs for? Well, death. Even that it would please God to destroy me, that he would let loose his hand and cut me off. Death is an end to pain. Death is an end to pain. In growing up, going to the congregation in Gonzales, there was a sister there who, I believe she died, it's been almost 10 years, I guess it was about 8 or 9 years ago. Miss Elba was her name. And she was almost 100 years old. I wanted to say she was about 96, 97 when she passed. And when you would ask her how she was doing, she would always say the same thing. I'm ready. I'm just waiting for God to take me. She knew that death would be an end to her suffering, and she was suffering with a lot of health issues. Of course, her body shutting down as she neared the end. But she would always say that, I'm ready. I'm just waiting on God to take me. And so Job is making a similar plea, if you will. I've got nothing left to live for. I'm just suffering. This is my whole existence. If only God would just grant me this wish. I'm ready to be taken. So death is something that we don't have to fear as New Testament Christians pursuing salvation. But in Job's case, God's not done with him. Job doesn't necessarily see that yet. Job does not know of the grand plan that's in place for him and Satan as far as Job being proof of strong faith against Satan, but he's got a higher purpose, and he does not see that. And so obviously, God's not going to grant him that reprieve. Again, not because God is some villain, but on the contrary, because God has bigger things in store in that he's going to restore everything to Job, ultimately. So if God can intervene here, which eventually God will come and speak to Job, if God can intervene here, he'd probably say something like, I'm not going to grant you that wish because you're going to prove Satan wrong for me. You're going to do me this, be this example for me. It's going to have a profound effect on the righteous from history onward after Job's account. Because as we remember, as we discussed in our introduction, Job is often referenced even in the New Testament. Jesus himself referenced Job. That's how profound of an impact Job's account is going to have. And so God's not going to grant this. As much as he wants to die, I would say that in his position, that's an understandable reaction. And we're not talking about suicide here. Obviously, if that were Job's intention, he would have tried that already, and I'm sure God would have stayed his hand. But I think the point is that God knew he would not attempt suicide. He knew that Job would see this through to the end in his infinite knowledge and wisdom. And so, continuing verse 10, then should I yet have comfort? Yea, I would harden myself in sorrow. Let him not spare, for I have not concealed the words of the Holy One. Once again, I've not concealed the words of the Holy One. There still is a reverence for God. He's not claiming God as an enemy or claiming God as a source of darkness. What is my strength that I should hope? And what is my end that I should prolong my life? What's the point? What's the point of me still living? Is my strength the strength of stones? Or is my flesh of brass? Is not my help in me, and is wisdom driven quite from me? What he's saying here, verses 11 through 13, I'm not a stone or a metal that can endure a lot of punishment. I'm not some kind of hardened man to where I can just remain stoic through all of this suffering. I'm not built to endure all of this. I'm a vulnerable man. I'm taking it very, very hard, as anyone would justifiably in this situation. I don't have the strength for this. That's what Job is saying. Ironically, Job is enduring this expressly because he has this strength. God knew if there's one man that I can allow Satan to throw everything at, and he will still be faithful to me, it's Job. God knows this. In this moment, Job, speaking about himself, is not so confident, but he's already been resilient. Think about how many people in Job's position would have forsaken God right out the gate. As a believer in God, as one who was a faithful man before this loss, that today even is many people's first reaction. Why did God do this? Or why did God allow this? That was never on Job's mind. He never expressed that. Verse 13, he says, I am helpless. I have nothing left to offer, not even wisdom. That's how Job paints himself. He has no idea, ironically, that already he's shown more fortitude than most people do at this time and even still today. And so when he says, is my strength the strength of stones? Am I strong like a stone? Or my flesh of brass? Do I have metal skin? Already he's in a figurative sense, of course. I would say, yeah, so far. I would say, yeah, you do have a strength about you. Not being helpless. The wisdom is not driven from him. He still maintains wisdom enough to worship God, to have a reverence to God. And so to answer his own question, I would say, yeah, he's doubting himself, but he's incorrect in his doubt. So this is an encouragement as we read this. A lot of times we're stronger than we think we are. We're more resilient than we think we are. We get through things as life occurs, suffering, of course, being a part of that at times, and we make it through, of course, with the help of God, God being the ultimate comforter. But we can be more resilient than I think sometimes we give ourselves credit for, and that's what Job is going through here today, in this time. And so, verse 14, he continues, "To him that is afflicted, pity should be showed from his friend, but he forsakes the fear of the Almighty." So now he's turning his attention. He says, now that I've said all that, let's talk about what you've just said to me, Eliphaz. To him that is afflicted, to the individual that is suffering, pity should be showed from his friend. And we can almost hear the air quotes as he's saying the word friend, but he forsakes the fear of the Almighty. My brethren have dealt deceitfully as a brook, and as the stream of brooks, they pass away, which are blackish by reason of the ice and wherein the snow is hid. First of all, of note, much of the Bible takes place in the Middle East, and there is snow in certain areas of the Middle East, but this being the patriarchal era, we have a little bit more broad range, although we are still dealing with that part of the world. We don't often think of these people being anywhere other than a desert. And so Job is interestingly using a snowy illustration. So it's very possible Job lived somewhere, maybe a little more north. I know there are parts of Italy that have snow-capped mountains, and certain, the Alps, I believe, extend in part into the Middle East. But just a bit of interesting geographical observation. It's possible Job lived somewhere where snow was common. But aside from that, that's just a little side note, something to consider. He's calling out his friends, calling them deceitful, like how snow covers ice on a river or on a brook. So when you walk on it, you don't see the black ice beneath that's about to collapse under your weight. The snow is concealing all that ice. So when you step on it, your foot goes through, the ice breaks, you fall into this icy water below. They hid their intentions, Job said. I thought you came here to comfort me, and now you're just here scolding me. This comfort was like a Trojan horse, if you will, to scold Job. They came under false pretenses, as Job is accusing them of. Now, initially, in chapter 1, during his state of mourning, chapter 2, in his state of mourning, he was silent for 7 days. They came to visit him, and he was in his silent period of mourning. This was custom at the time, for 7 days, sitting in silence, as that's what they did. And so Job, during that time, I'm sure he's thinking, okay, when this is done, when I'm out of my 7-day period of mourning, now I'll have all these friends here to comfort. And who better to have by your side when you have lost your family than friends? Having people there to comfort you, and so I'm sure that was a great comfort initially just to see them. And now that they're starting to talk, they're just accusing him of being a sinner, being some kind of secret heathen. So he says, you hid your intentions, you're deceitful. Verse 17, what time they wax warm, they vanish. When it is hot, they are consumed out of their place. The paths of their way are turned aside, they go to nothing and perish. The troops of Tema looked, the companies of Sheba waited for them. They were confounded because they had hoped. They came thither and were ashamed. Now this account, the troops of Tema, one biblical scholar explained the caravans of the nomadic people coming from Tema are represented as arriving at those places where it was well known that torrents descended from the mountains. So torrential rivers flowing, and they were full of expectation that here they could not only satiate their thirst, but fill their gerbas, water skins, when they arrive. They find the waters totally, when they arrive, they find the waters totally dissipated and lost. And so in vain did the caravans of Sheba wait for them. He did not reappear, and they were confounded because they had hoped to find here refreshment and rest. And so imagine that feeling, you're parched, you're just so thirsty, and someone brings you a tall cup, they hand it to you, you go to drink, you tilt it back, there's nothing in that cup. How disappointed you must be. You're so thirsty, there's no water in it. That's what Job is feeling. Here I was expecting comfort from my closest friends, and now I have nothing. Now I have none of that. Nobody's comforting me. Nobody's here making me feel any better about the situation. Here I am hoping God heals me. And I have nobody to comfort, to say, no, it's all right. It's all right. I'm here. I'm with you. You still have reason to live. That's what Job needs right now. That's what Job desires. He does not have that. And so now on top of losing his children, losing his wealth, his land, his livestock, losing everything, and his health, he does not have the comfort necessary. It feels probably like he's lost his friends functionally. From now, verse 21, you are nothing. You see my casting down and are afraid. Did I say, bring unto me, or give a reward for me of your substance, or deliver me from the enemy's hands, or redeem me from the hand of the mighty? Teach me, and I will hold my tongue, and cause me to understand where I've erred. Job says, I didn't ask anything of you. Did I ask you to bring me anything? Did I ask you to do anything for me? Do anything else for me? I only expected comfort. Is that too much to ask? Help me understand, friends, why you're coming at me like this. Help me understand it. I didn't ask anything of you. I didn't do anything untoward towards you. And this is how you're coming to me. How forcible are right words? But what does your arguing reprove? Do you imagine to reprove words in the speeches of one that is desperate, which are as wind? Yea, you overwhelm the fatherless, and you dig a pit for your friend. Job recognizes the strength of a well-constructed argument. Once again, there are things that Eliphaz said that were objectively truthful about the righteous, about God. But again, they don't apply to Job. And so furthermore, he is willing to accept an argument, even if it proves his guilt. But that's just the thing, it has to prove his guilt. Their criticism of Job is therefore unjustified. And so Job accuses them of making desperate speeches that reproved him, or that were pointed at him. But they were no more substantial, he says, than the wind. You're just blowing hot air, as we might say today. And then he says, you dig a pit for your friend. Verse 27. You dig a pit for your friend. There was a case just a few years ago of a woman who talked her boyfriend into suicide. She talked him into it. Obviously, she was disturbed, but for weeks, for months, she was convincing him to do this. And he ultimately, through texts and all that, there was a paper trail because she was convicted very easily for it. But he went through. He went through with it. And she was culpable because she had talked him into it. And so it made national news, got national attention. Some of you might remember it. I wouldn't say it was around 2021 that this happened. But she was convicted of a crime because she was involved in his death, even though it was a suicide. And so at this point, I'm sure Job is kind of feeling like he's in a similar situation. Here I am hopeless, he said. I'm hopeless. Here I am waiting to just die. I'm waiting for somebody to just give me some reason to live, some kind of comfort, something, anything. And all you've done is just further make me want to be off of this earth, away from this life. Job is saying, you may as well dig my grave. You're killing me. This is how he feels. Now therefore, verse 28, be content, look upon me, for it is evident unto you if I lie. You'll know if I'm lying. Return, I pray you, let it not be iniquity. You return again, my righteousness is in it. Is there iniquity in my tongue? Cannot my taste discern perverse things? So Job is essentially saying, try again. Try again. Look at my life, examine my life, and it'll be clear if I've done anything wrong, or you'll know if I'm lying. So he claims his innocence. Verse 30, Job declares he is able to discern good and evil, just as the taste buds can discern certain flavors in food. I think of cilantro. A lot of people taste cilantro as soap. They taste like it tastes like soap to them. I like cilantro. I don't have that whatever gene that activates that. But I know somebody, if you have the slightest amount of cilantro in a pizza sauce or spaghetti sauce or something, they can taste it and will not eat it. It tastes like somebody put Purell in their food to them. And so that's what Job is saying. I'm able to discern good and evil. He examines, or he equates it to the tongue. My taste can discern perverse things. If something is in my mouth, it tastes bad, obviously I have the wherewithal to spit it out. That's something we read of Job in chapter 1. He eschewed evil. But he's qualified to know what his spiritual state is. He can know the sincerity of his own heart. He can know whether he has so sinned as to bring all of this turmoil upon him. He knows that he is not being punished for sin. Once again, he doesn't have the full picture, but he knows he's innocent. He knows this is not a punishment for anything. He's thinking, I'm a righteous man. I've done everything right. I've lived sinlessly. And the Bible tells us as much. God says as much. So he says, this is not any kind of punishment. And if you can prove otherwise, by all means, be my guest. And so with that, we have Job chapter 6 as the first response of Job. Job chapter 7, which we will not have time to get into this morning, will be a direct continuation from chapter 6. It's a Job's continued dialogue against Eliphaz. And so we'll get right into that next week. Any questions or comments? If not, appreciate your time this morning.